I'm content creator Cori Walmsley, the founder of Aurora Borealis Publishing. I'm dedicated to helping women entrepreneurs make a big impact by turning the next page with tools, tips, and resources that empower and connect the dots through books, publishing, and more. Every episode includes me, along with a featured guest on my globally recognized show, Page Turner Studio with Cori. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Page Turner Studio with Cori. I'm your host, Cori Walmsley. I'm CEO of Aurora Borealis Publishing, as well as an author of almost 10 books. My 10th one is coming out in November of 2023. It's called The Treasures We Seek. So we're actually going to talk a teensy bit about that today because it has something to do with our topic. So today we're going to be talking about how to effectively use AI as an author with translator Jane Kim. And Jane is really interesting. I met her on LinkedIn and we immediately connected over books and all those fun things. But she is absolutely fascinating. So I think you guys are going to love her. Let me introduce you to her. Jane Kim is an English-Korean translator with 16 years of experience. She has co-translated multiple books, and her first English book was published early in 2023 and aimed to be translated into more languages for global readers. And why is that important? Because not everybody speaks English. So I think it's wonderful that we have people all over the world who are translating books into different languages. So we get to benefit from everybody's knowledge everywhere. So this is an incredibly important job. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Jane up from the green room and we will get started talking. Hello and welcome.
Hi, hello, Cori. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on. I'm really excited to talk about your book and AI and translation and all those fun things.
Sure. I'm really excited myself. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, I know AI is your thing. So we're going to start by talking about your book, The Future of Translation. Tell me a little bit about what inspired this one.
Sure. Again, to those who don't know me yet, I'm Jane Kim from South Korea, and I am a translator of long service years. So I started my career as a translator when I was in my mid-20s. So it was a long time ago. And when I was starting out, there was not really, this much concern about machine, because in the first place, there's no machine translation services like these days. So it was not much of a topic to think through. But these days, especially in the past few years, 5 to 7 years, the machine translation got developed to a significant level, up to a level, I would say, where it can really compete with people or humans. So for me personally, it happened in 2021. So before that, I tried not to utilize machine, as much as possible, because I always valued my own knowledge and experiences. I only thought that that was the way to do the translation. It was the right way to do it. Out of respect to my readers and clients and all that, I tried not to use, any of the automated services at all. But then again, I started to realize that the machine translation quality was getting better and better. And one day I decided to try this. It was a scary thing for me because, in my mind, machine was my competitor. Right. It was not my assistant. It was not my, it was not amplifying anything, any good out of me was what I was thinking. So I was not supposed to be using it. So I was scared, but I got really serious to, bring that into my life, to be part of my life. So I tried it out for one personal project, and I discovered that, before I used to do translations from Korean to English too. And the quality of, that target language was better compared to mine when I was experimenting with the, machine tools, one of the machine translation tools back in 2021. So I felt that it was my responsibility as somebody who worked in this field for so many years to at least, dig into this field or this thing so that there's something I can tell to, for example, to my fellows or people around me, because I was getting even more and more questions from, around in terms of our work scope and, how are we going to cope with this thing and all that. So before it was in the dark room, but then again, I started to, dig into this further and do more and more researches. It turns out I just think it's a fascinating thing. And it's also a fascinating age to live in, because we used to live in an analog world where, there was no concerns about machines or, no topics regarding it at all. But now we're really headed into this whole different realm of the world. So in the next couple of years, it'll be even more different. So that's how basically my whole research got started out, and, it made up to be a whole book.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. So when you were exploring with AI, obviously, you said that you were thinking, okay, to start out with, this is a competitor, but now it's actually a tool I can use. And I'm assuming that it's a tool that actually helps enhance what you're doing. How does that work?
I actually have to do all of my client works from scratch due to the matter of confidentiality.
Okay.
So how it works really is that depending on clients, they all use different tools for their own translations. Sometimes they bring into their own tools, the machine translation algorithm and all that, but it's not our work to do. It's the client's decision to, whether they're going to use some of the machine translation database or not. So it really depends on the projects we get to work on. Okay. So how I get to really utilize it is to most of the time use for my personal projects. Okay. So for example, I translated the book that was just mentioned, The Future of Translation. I translated the whole book into English using machine translation engine called DeepL. And it was clearly mentioned within the book that I translated the whole book using that, engine. I wanted to show people how much a machine can do and how much the quality got better. So it's really at this right point for my personal use, but I wanted to really make that clear that machine can do so much more than probably we are expecting it to do. And we need to get really prepared in terms of our, not only knowledge, but also mindset. Because there might be somebody, out there who are still, hesitant to use this as our tool, because most of the time, due to this confidentiality and all that, we have that respect toward our clients. Of course, that's our, morality for our work and all that. And it's very, very important. And we're educated, surrounded by that, mindset and, thinking process. So even for our personal projects, we are sometimes hesitant or slower in trying new things. But it's really the time that you start experimenting. If you're, some of you are not yet. So yeah, it's a great tool to boost up your knowledge and skills and all that. So you just start playing around with it. It's a good idea.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I mentioned at the very beginning that I wrote a book that is coming out this fall. And part of it takes place in Italy. Actually, a chunk of it takes place in Italy, The Treasures We Seek. And when I was working on that, I decided I was going to go online and trust Google Translate, and I let Google Translate translate for me. And I felt like I could trust it like 90%. But then I actually sent that book to a friend of mine who lives in Italy. She grew up in Italy, but she speaks fluent English. She's not a translator by trade, but she's somebody that I trusted to read the book and tell me, did I make sense? Am I saying something completely off the wall? Is that something that we need to be doing, is just double checking whenever we're using AI like that?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, congratulations on your books going global. I think it's always an exciting opportunity to be able to talk with more groups of people from around the world.
Mhm.
And that's part of our work to do as translators, right? We are connecting dots for different audiences from different backgrounds because we know the culture so well. We understand the text so much. And, there are a lot of, matters, including the understanding of context and all, which machine cannot quite catch up yet. So I really strongly recommend that you, especially for the book translations, it is a normal practice, even to date, to, work and collaborate with human translators.
Mhm.
So what I do right now, like I tried out this engine for my own book translation, right? But it was only possible because, for one, I know the language, I know English, so I know how much good of a quality that book is, and I made it clear on an intention that, especially to show some of my fellows and other people that, how much machine can do and what it cannot do yet. So there were people who reached out to me when they were not really understanding these sentences, these words and whatnot, because I did not do the post editing. So in the localization business, localization is a translation service for multilingual services. So if some global company like, I don't know, Amazon, Google, Apple are trying to launch their services on the global scale, they need a localization team. So they use a lot of tools because they need to, launch this service very fast and all that. They need to engage with their audience and users in an interactive way through the translation process. They need these tools. So it's very common for them to use tools and technology of very up-to-date services. But for book translations, it's a whole different world.
Yeah.
So it's still very human. So like we don't even use, I can tell you this because I am a book translator, but also I'm a localizer. So these two words are very, very different, which are not very known to, readers or users because they don't, have to know. But, for book translations, we don't even use tools oftentimes. So it's still very from scratch. So it's not a common practice to use translation engines for book translations. So I really strongly recommend, publishers, if there are, publishers who are looking to translate their books, then they might want to reach out to human translators. The cost oftentimes is not really luxurious either. So it's very reasonable to, because they know the content and they'll translate your content with caution and much care.
Yeah. I 100% value other humans taking a look at my work. So sure. I understand what you're saying there. Thank you for sharing all of that. That was a lot of stuff that I've been wanting to talk about, but it's not my expertise. So I really appreciate that we could have that conversation. So I wanted to share Jane's impactful page turner share. Keep going and growing as you go. And I'm sure you have some stories behind this. How did you learn about this? Is this about your business? Is it about writing the book, or everything?
Sure. So I believe it's a very relevant topic to everyone who is living, the world at this right time. So again, it's a very exciting time to be part of because the speed of development of technology is just so fascinating. So everyone can be part of it, is how I see it. So even the translators, which is a profession quite is traditional, can be a part of this process. I believe there are a lot of work and projects, but also as part of our personal projects, we're at a very good position where to experiment distill, because we are the magician of sentences. We are the magician of language, just you are, Cori. So, so I really like your content. But what I'm trying to point out here is that because the evolvement is so fast, nobody can expect anything or anticipate anything for certain or for sure. So in the next few years, there will be a lot of changes, right? There are just tons of tools being launched even today in relevant to AI. So if you just type in to search for some services for example, marketing, to utilize AI, there will be thousands of names that will pop up. So this kind of things make you at the very front line if you are just a little bit interested in utilizing this a bit faster than from the crowd. So keep going, because this is the time of the change, and it will make a significant change if you're a little bit faster than some other people. So again, we're not competing with each other, but there are tons of opportunities that are being created, is how I'm looking at it.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, like you mentioned about AI, and I think a lot of times, we're going along and then we bump into things like that and we go, oh, I don't know about this. And it does kind of keep us from growing, because, then we're sitting here going, well, I'm going to continue doing what I was doing, instead of saying, how can that help me? Or how can this over here help me? Or I'm going to try it a little bit and see if it works for me, and then understand, okay, it does or it doesn't, and then continue growing from there. So I love that that's your share. And I want more people to be open to trying new things. I think that's wonderful. And I wanted to share your being a page turner tip. Be your authentic self to keep writing. How did this play out for you when you were working on your book?
Sure. I think it's a great question, because everybody has a unique story to tell and give to the world. And I think that leads us to the desire. I think everybody somewhat has a desire to publish, for example, an autobiography of themselves. And this book called The Future of Translation sort of serves like that for me, because it covers the whole story of my career. But when you're putting yourself out there by writing, for example, it's important for us to be our authentic self, because I only discovered that that's the way to be sustainable with our own creativity. So to keep writing, I feel that it must be something fun for you in the first place, if you want to keep going. So if you want to keep publishing and keep writing about something, if you are not a fictional writer of some sort, I think the best way for us to do it is to really write about yourself and about your journey by looking back into it and what you're learning about it. So for it to happen, you have to be honest with yourself, for one, and also be authentic when you're putting yourself out there. And people feel it when they're reading it, and they, I think, appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think that some people find it hard to be their authentic selves if they're not used to writing too. So this is a really good tip for them to remember. I've had people over the years approach me and say, well, I can't write like this writer. Of course, you're not going to write like that writer. You're not that writer. You are you. Write like you. But they get caught in their heads and they feel like they have to, write like a term paper or something. I'm like, no, write like you're talking to me, like we're having a conversation. Just be authentic and open up.
I couldn't agree more. Yes, it's something like talking to your friends.
Yeah.
And it can be different depending on people. They can do in different ways. But for me personally, it feels the most comfortable when I feel like I am talking to somebody in real time, real person. That makes me so comfortable in sharing and writing things about, including myself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good tip. So I wanted to share the turn the page with Cori tip. Inspiration can come from anywhere we are. Be open to it. How do you find inspiration for your work? I know you are, you want to write more books in the future. So where are you finding inspiration?
Sure. So I'm currently writing this book called Future with AI because I'm all about future in AI. So it's again a nonfiction book. But I also, tried out writing a short novel with ChatGPT. So it's another question I actually wanted to share and ask to you, Cori, too.
Yeah.
How do you think about, utilizing these AI tools in terms of creative writings? It's another topic because my future book series they're all nonfiction. So I think it's more of a research. It feels like for me to write a thesis sometimes because it requires a lot of interviews, in-depth, talks, things like that. But creative writing is also an interesting topic to discuss in this realm in the time of AI. So inspirations for me really comes from everywhere, including this, new technology, how to embrace it, how to, be adaptive to the changes both externally and internally. So in terms of internal inspirations, I like to read a lot of books and from a lot of topics.
Mhm.
So I also read a lot of self-development books, and I take on, advices from different authors. And that at some point, grew my mind. So recently I did this interview with another great author, and she wrote this book called Grow Your Mind, Grow Your Life. So your internal world is or landscape is something you want to work on consistently. I think it applies to every single person who's living on this earth.
Yeah.
So whenever you read something really good, or whenever you look out the window and look at the sky and it's so beautiful, I think this smallest things also can be an inspiration
Yeah.
for your internal growth. So all of this come together for me as an inspiration, which I feel so grateful for.
Yeah. Oh, that was really beautiful. I am right with you on being inspired by other books. I mean, obviously, uh, I read a lot, and there are times when I'm reading something and I'll start kind of spinning it in my head later, like, oh, that was really interesting. I wonder what would happen if it played out this way. And that kind of gets me inspired for other things that I'm working on. But then it also, when you own a business, you become a personal growth sort of junkie. So then I end up starting to think about like, well, I wonder why they reacted this way. I wonder what pieces are missing here. I wonder what sort of personal growth they need to do. So I'm thinking about what my characters or what those characters need to do, and that actually helps me kind of reflect on how people around me are reacting. Because sometimes it's easier to look at a character and say, oh, this isn't a real person. Let me analyze them. And then you come across it in real life and you go, oh, I've thought about that one before. Now I understand how this person is doing this in this situation. So I do think
Mm.
that's really important. And you brought up about using AI when you're working on books. And I've talked to a couple people who do that, and it seems like one of the popular ways of doing it is to help structure outlines. Is that what
Mm.
you do?
Um, I so far tried it out for outlining for my audio scripting. So
Oh,
it's a great tool for me in many many ways because it creates a script for my, for example, audio series.
mhm.
Because I'm a podcaster too,
Right.
so it gives me a very good outline for that part. But I haven't tried it out for my writing outlining yet.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, that's a good idea too.
Yeah. Yeah, I did want to mention too, I'm not sure what it's like copywriting a book in other countries, but I know in the United States that it's difficult to get a copyright for a book if the entire thing has been done with a like an AI tool. So I did want to mention that while we were talking, because I didn't want someone to say, oh, I'm going to just put this in and AI is going to spit out a whole novel and then I'm going to, publish the novel, because that's not how it works at all.
Sure, that's a very important point. It works the same in my part of the world. So you have to make it clear that it was written with ChatGPT or by ChatGPT.
Okay.
And these days there are more tools that are getting better when censoring whether it was written by AI or with the help of AI. So there are a lot more technology being evolved in that part of the world, especially in terms of education and publishing world, I think. So I'm really excited to see how the publishing world will be receiving this technology and somehow, find a balance.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's always good for us to know a little bit more about how we can effectively use that for our work. And I wanted to share the make an impact tip with Cori. Don't be afraid to ask for help from friends, family, and AI. And this kind of goes back to what we've already been talking about. Don't be afraid of AI. Go ahead and test it out. It helps you grow if you're learning new things. Don't be afraid to message a friend and say, hey, I've been thinking about this for my book. What do you think of this? And get their honest opinion. Is this something that you've done too? Friends, family, pitching to them, asking them questions?
Oh, absolutely. So I am so lucky and I got to be part of this team called AI English.
Uh-huh.
It's a project team, nonprofit one, to test out and experiment how much AI can do in terms of specifically in this occasion,
Okay.
education for English. Because English is a huge thing. Of course, for many people it's a good tool for communications for the larger part of the world.
Mhm.
So self-educating yourself use a foreign language using this AI tool is such a game changer.
Oh,
So we're specifically focusing on that part, but everybody can, again, as I mentioned, can start utilizing at least one or two tools. There are a lot of tools according to your own specific interest to try out. So it can be a fun personal project, and you can even, build a small, I don't know, gig project and be an entrepreneur by experimenting with one of those tools. So it is, again, a very good time for you to put yourself out there and start experimenting different things, and you will be on a different realm.
yeah, very cool. Yeah, so I actually had a couple other little questions for you before we wrap up. So what are some tips for finding and working effectively with a translator for your book? A human translator for your book.
Oh, this is a great question. Thank you so much for asking. So there are different ways. For one, there are a lot of book translation agencies. So it may work a little different depending on country, but I think it might be quite similar in terms of, the general logic. But, there are agencies
Mhm.
and translators. So you can directly reach out to translators using, for example, the platform like LinkedIn.
Okay.
As we were connected with each other,
Yeah.
there are a lot of translators, very, very good translators, who are sincere with their work, who might be willing to help you out in terms of, taking care of the whole translation. But also, there are publishers who prefer to work with translation agencies because, especially they know and handle different languages. And they handle all the relevant coordination work, communication work, and all that stuff. And they generally take care of the quality level. So
Mhm.
you can have a high expectation. But if you are lucky enough to be connected with the good translators, which I believe can, then they will also be a good channel for your book to be published. So if you are for the first time in terms of going into the global market, maybe collaborate with a translation agency for a couple of times. And if you are now have the discerning eye for distinguished translators, then you might also start working and collaborating with translators directly.
Awesome. Those are really good tips. I have not worked with a translator yet, so that's really helpful because I wasn't sure how to answer that question when I get that. So thank you.
My pleasure.
And then, if somebody finds a translator, so let's say like you and I are going to work together, me as the author, what should I ask of you? Is there anything that I should make sure you have? So, aside from the book, obviously, so that you can work most effectively.
Sure. So depending on the occasion, it may work differently a little, but sometimes you can ask test for a translated page, for example. Yeah. So it's what normally a translation agency would do. So even if it's a book translation agency, so I'll just tell you from my own experience. So when I was working with this book translation agency, so I have different experiences. I work with publishers directly. I work with book translation agencies. I work with localization clients. But when I was getting my translation book published through a book translation agency, the book translation agency communicated with the publisher and also requested me. So they are being the channel for communications between different parties and requested me to be part of a test. It's something like a competition or something like that. So how it works is three or four translators, they submit their translations for A4 page amount of translation so that they can make a comparison. Because, not only because of the quality, but also for the style. There are different style required if you are translating a novel, translating a self-development book, essay. It should be all different. And somebody is better at some, structure, some other style. So I'm good at self-development because that's the field I'm really into. Other people are better at, sometimes novels, essays, things like that. So there are specialized fields, even though we can handle different areas. They, for the sake of the, decision making, they require you to submit the test. So that way it's easier for you as a publisher to make a comparison and make a decision. And sometimes it gives you the feeling that, oh, this might be the person. I like this sentence. I like the tone. I like how it feels like when I'm reading. So that's how, the whole decision making is happening.
Okay. Yeah, that's something that I hadn't thought of. Yeah, it makes sense that you would want somebody who has the right tone and the right style for the writing, to make sure that, if you're writing a romance novel, it doesn't come across as a tech manual.
Exactly. So I once took part in a test for a romance novel, and it was not really my cup of tea either. It was not my strongest, merit. But I'm really enjoying it when I'm doing, translations for other tasks. So it also should be something that the translator should be able to have some fun, I believe. That way you'll get, both parties will be benefited because the quality will be good.
Yeah. Wow, that was such a great tip. Thank you for sharing that. It's been wonderful having you on. I wish we could sit here and talk all night about this, but
me too. I wish I could do this again. So anytime. But yes, I had so much fun today too. So thank you again for having me.
Sure. Thank you for being on. I'm going to send you back to the green room and we will wrap up.
Okay. Thanks so much for everyone for joining. And it was great seeing you again, Cori. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Take care.
All right. Well, that was an amazingly informative episode of Page Turner Studio with Cori. We learned so much about AI and using that as a tool for our writing. I'm excited to start experimenting with this myself because I do want to grow and learn and keep going, as Jane said. So make sure you join me for another episode of Page Turner Studio with Cori. We're on at 7 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Central. And if you're in the Pittsburgh area like I am, 10 a.m. Eastern time. And I always have another amazing guest on. It's on Wednesday mornings, of course. So make sure you join me next time and have a page-turning day. Thank you for joining me today. You can learn more about me, my products, and services at auroracoriolispublishing.com. Make sure to join me for another episode every Wednesday at 7 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Central on my globally recognized show, Page Turner Studio with Cori.